Fearless investors, welcome back. I am excited about this one because this one was probably one of the better ones that we've had in a long time because of who it was. We have John Bianchi, the STR Data Guys, who most of you know him by. That is his alias, but he's also a good friend of mine that has seen my journey from start to finish. So there's a lot that we actually kind of relate on. And in this podcast, he actually shares a ton of nuggets about his journey, but also about what he does and how he can help you specifically with the analytical side of knowing that you're buying a rental that makes sense in today's market, which is absolutely crucial. You used to be able to have a lot more margin for error when it comes to buying a short-term rental or investing in one. But nowadays you have to be dialed because of how competitive the game is today. And so this is it's an incredible one where I think a lot of you are going to be able to take real value today and apply it in your business tomorrow. So make sure you dial in and we will dive right into it. John Bianchi. Fearless investors, welcome back. Another week at it, baby. I'm super stoked about today because I have somebody who I consider a good friend. I've known John really since the beginning of Elk Ridge Management. Like John has been one of the OGs that's kind of seen my growth, and we've kept in touch. And it's been exciting because it hasn't been mutually exclusive to just my growth. I've sat and watched John. I feel like every time I call him, he's doing something bigger and better. And so I'm super stoked to dive into his story. A lot of you may know him as the STR Data Guy, the Airbnb Data Guy. He does a lot of work in that space, has a bigger following than me even. And so I'm just super thankful and appreciative for you to be here, John. Thank you so much, man.
I appreciate more than anything, man. I mean, like, I hope on this podcast we can just kind of shoot the shit because, like, that's what we've been doing for 2 years, right? Yeah, man. I mean, like, I remember when you first got started and like we were just talking about it, how you blew up very, very quickly, and I was like, this makes no sense. How did this guy get so many properties so quickly? So, like, hopefully we can, reminisce a little bit on that kind of stuff. But
100%.
Love watching your journey. It's awesome.
Appreciate it, man, and the feeling's mutual, man. You've got a lot going on. You really created a space for yourself in the Airbnb space as the analyst, right? And then you've kind of moved into bigger and better things. I don't know if you're open to it, but I'd love to hear about your company, right? And how you have a relationship with TechVestor. We'll dive into all that. Sure. But I kind of want to just remind people, if you're sitting watching, please drop some comments. If you have questions for John, drop some comments. We'll get to them throughout the whole podcast. But John, I like to kind of rewind and really get to know people's story from the beginning. I think our audience loves the authenticity part. Yeah. And so if you wouldn't mind, let's back up to how'd you start in this space? How'd you start in the Airbnb industry?
So I used to be a financial advisor, had my own business where I managed $10 million, business partner managed 90 million. I was 24, had, my name on the door, had my own assistant. I was pretty much like set up for life as long as I just kept plugging away. And I absolutely hated what I was doing, like day in, day out. I was like, I'm not built for this. This is not my thing. And like as an entrepreneur, it was also extremely limiting. You can only kind of build to the number of clients you can manage, which really bothered me as well, right? So I had a spare room in my apartment, and I was like, I'm going to give this Airbnb thing a shot. Like, I want to see what it's like. And I ended up renting out my spare room. I did it so poorly that I rented out my entire space. And so I actually had to move back in with my parents for the first 2 weeks because I didn't want to get a bad review. So that's how that is literally like the OG first 2 weeks into the Airbnb space, which is it's just so funny to think back on like what that was like. At one point, there was a family of like 7 that was staying in my 2-bedroom apartment. I was yeah. So anyways, that's like way back. What really like kicked it off for me was I started reading a crazy amount of articles and got tapped into AirDNA. Right. Once I looked into AirDNA, my whole mind exploded. I was like, holy crap, you can actually see how much these people are making. Right. Which made it so much easier to understand what you would end up doing with that property. Right. I always kind of related it to like, if I were to buy a McDonald's, right. And I knew how much money I had to put up front, but I had a really good idea of how much that McDonald's was going to make every year. It would make it a really straightforward investment, right? Yeah. 100,000 makes 100,000 a year. great. That's an amazing investment, right? And that's kind of how I related it in my brain. I was like, that's pretty amazing. And I realized there are all these other people building out like a whole portfolio of these. And I was like, well, you just keep stacking them on and you can keep growing. So that's like the whole origin story that like really blew my mind when I first got started. And then from there, it's just, off to the races and you get going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, I love that because that's I feel like a lot of us have similar stories to that. How we all just like kind of stumbled upon Airbnb. You start with the room. I started with my first primary house that I ever bought. And then it becomes like a snowball effect from there, right?
Yeah.
And so go ahead.
No, for sure. I agree with you completely on that. Like I remember signing up for it and where I was when I was signing up for Airbnb and like telling people, yeah, I'm just gonna see how it goes. You know what I mean? And then it's addictive. If you really like it, it's addictive because you can just keep getting more.
100%. So let me ask you this: do you still have that listing archived? Do you still have pictures of it and things like that?
Probably. I think so. If I were to go back into the account, it should be there. It was brutal, dude. It was homemade wood bunk bed in like a shitty apartment in a non-tourist town that rented for like $30 to $40 a night. So
yeah, I still have mine. Like I kept it for like, just like started from the bottom, now we here type of mindset, So, but it's so funny as we look back on just where we're at now to look back on those times and be like, we didn't know anything.
You didn't know anything. I was telling somebody yesterday about this mistake that I did when I first got started. I'm like, people just need to like start their first Airbnb and then they get it, right? Like I think like one of the not annoying things, but people will ask you so many questions about how to Airbnb before they open their first one. Once they open their first one, they manage for like 1 month. They're good. They get it. They understand. They figure out all the questions. It's like, just open it. You know what I mean? Like, just get it going.
That's so funny because that's so true. Like people just experience ultimately is the best teacher in this game. And so it's
I
so
always
funny.
say I'm super biased when I say this, but I believe it to my core. The only thing you need to learn before you start your first Airbnb is data. You need to understand Airbnb data, how to find the right property, because everything else you can figure out once you get it up and running. But if you get the wrong property from the get-go, you're effed, right? Like you're screwed.
Yep.
So my whole thing is like, study the data, learn it inside and out, find the right property, then worry about how the hell you're going to message a guest, right? Yeah. What do I say to the guest? How do I message them? How do I clean it? How do I do this? It's like, don't worry about it. You know what I mean? Like, screw up on that 20 times over and you'll still be fine if you have the right property in the right location.
Yeah. So. Hey, we're going to do this real quick. Let me, I found it, dude. This is my first one, dude. Now, and looking at it, I'm like, it's actually not that bad. Like, but I mean,
better than mine.
I remember, as you can tell, I shopped at Walmart.
and you took photos with your iPhone 3.
100%. Like, there's not even a bed frame. That's just like the box spring in the bed.
Yeah.
Oh man! So
no Walmart whatsoever.
I know. It's just funny to dive back and see all that. So
I don't even think I can find mine. I don't know. I don't know how to find it if they do archive it. Anyways, that's hilarious. Yeah, OG. That's how you get started. How many years ago did you get started? Now, like 3.
This original listing was back in 2019, 2018, somewhere around there.
Okay, so you've been going for quite a while before I got to know you then.
Yeah, when I got to Kyle, I had a handful of properties already, and so it was but I wasn't optimized at all, right? And but I wasn't also committed to it either. Like at that time, I still had my sales job that was full time, and then I was just kind of running this on the side, and then kind of we got to the point where everybody gets to. It's like, hey, how do I make the jump, right? And so which is, and I want to throw that back to you, right? Because you obviously did it from your room. You started seeing some success, didn't know what you're doing. So what was the turning point? Where, was there a moment in time of your W-2 where you were like, hey, I'm going to make this jump? Did you do it comfortably, or was it kind of a leap of faith? Like, I'd love to hear more context into that side of your story.
Yeah, for sure. So first thing I want to mention is that I wasn't working a W-2. Like I built up a business over 3 years that got to the point where it's finally sustainable, right? Like I worked my ass off to build it to this point. Which I say that simply to say that it was really hard to make that push as well, right? To like really like decide to make that change. Now at the same time, I'm only 24, and I was very much so in the phase of do whatever you got to do to make it work. Like, you know what I mean? Like if this isn't working out, don't be afraid to leave it. You know what I mean? Like to
Yeah.
try something bigger or better. Whereas like as you get older, you build something for 10 years and it's like after 10 years, it's not working. You're like, I'm just going to keep doing it. You know what I mean? And you kind of live in this like mediocre sort of setup for a really long time. But when you're 24 and like, you know, it's a lot easier at that age, you know, no kids, you know, nothing along those lines, no houses. It's a big different situation. So, but regardless, what happened was, you know, I got that first one set up, which was just a spare bedroom. I was like, this is pretty cool. Studied a crazy amount into Airbnb. Then I realized, like, I opened up another place in Detroit, and got that one up and running. I opened up another one just outside of Detroit, and those two gave me a lot of confidence that I understood how to continue to expand this, and I understood like the operations. Both of those properties were duds. Like they were not going to be amazing properties whatsoever. But they gave me the confidence to be able to like continue to figure it out. And I ended up raising around $250,000 from some local people that were also entrepreneurs that wanted to go into this business with me and scale it. And so they were going to back me, right? But I still had my job or the business that I built up, and so I had to leave that business and then go into build up the Airbnb business. And it kind of just all happened within a very short period of time. It was literally like they agreed to finance. I then talked to my business partner. I was like, "Hey, I'm leaving. Like this is the situation." He was totally okay with it because of the way it was set up. It was an easy transition. I then took off and started building out that business. So it was a fairly quick situation, but I got the confidence from the first few, and then obviously raising that money made it like a done deal. Like, yep, we've got this. We're going. Let's do it. So yeah,
Love it. Love it. So you had entrepreneurial spirit already. Like it sounded like you and success at that, which is huge, right? Because a lot of people that come to us, oftentimes those people we talk about that ask those questions, that seems to always be the biggest obstacle. It's like themselves. It's like you got to just jump, you know?
yeah. You know what? I'll say this. I definitely went to a Tony Robbins event. One of his like
Okay.
one of his events. Now,
Let's go.
yeah, Tony Robbins gets a ton of shit, right? But I always say if you go to one of his events, you'll never talk shit about him again. So like that's kind of the way it goes, right? Because like you don't get it unless you actually go through it. And I would say when going to that event, because I was kind of like I was trying to learn, you know what I mean? I was trying to learn as much as I could. When I went to that event, it did change my mind and go like, hey, you clearly don't like this thing, make a decision. You know what I mean? Like make a
Yeah.
decision, move forward. So it made it easier to make the decision from that event. I remember walking back into like the office after going to that and just thinking to myself like, oh, I'm going to be out of here pretty soon. Like I'm
Yeah.
going to be done with this pretty soon. So I just do want to give, you know, Tony a little credit there because he definitely helped out.
Let's go. Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
If you're joining us just now, we got John Bianchi, the Airbnb data guy. We're diving into his story. Please leave comments below of questions that you have for him. We'll take them throughout the podcast. Spencer, what's up, bro? Glad you could join us. He says truth with an exclamation mark. So
Nice.
Love it. Love it. Okay, so you make this jump. Okay, we're gonna dive back in. You make this jump. Where did you start your business? Like what strategy? Because obviously we know there's a lot of ways to partake. You got owner, operator, co-host, arbitrage. What business did you start to build yourself?
Started off with arbitrage because that's what I was taught. That was what I had money to do. That was sort of like the knowledge that I had built up. In other words, at that time, I would have had no idea how to properly purchase a property and it'd be actually a good investment that would have been a good Airbnb. But I did kind of figure out how to rent a property, do the whole rental arbitrage deal. So rental arbitrage is what I got started with. I built up, I can't remember the exact number, 5, 6, something like that. Then I realized that this whole property management thing was an option. And I was like, wow, I could, you know, get a contract, pretty much make almost the same amount of money and it doesn't cost me anything. Kind of a no-brainer. So I started getting more of those as I continued to build up. I'm not a good salesman at all, like whatsoever. I'm not good at sales. I'm great partnerships, love talking with people. Like you and I have a great relationship. If I had to sit down and sell you something, I would lose, right? Like it would be extremely difficult for me to do. And so I wish I had amazing sales skills, but I just didn't. So it was really hard for me to kind of continue to build up that business with the way I was going. So I think at max I hit 15 between arbitrage and management. But really what was like the key thing there that allowed me to unlock a lot of time freedom was actually a cleaning company. So
Wow.
instead of hiring a cleaning company to manage all my properties, I hired somebody to hire all of the cleaners and run the cleaning company. And it actually was cheaper to do that. And that person was also able to manage all of the Airbnbs at the same time. So they ran the cleaning company and the Airbnb business all together. They just were essentially the COO, operated everything. Any sort of like hard things or hard things to figure out, or anything sort of systems we need to build out, we would kind of collaborate and work together on that. But that was kind of like the key thing that cut it off, or saved me a bunch of time, right? So to answer your question, started with arbitrage, made it into management, eventually opened up the cleaning company, had all three of those going within Chicago, within the 2019 period, and then 2020 came around and wiped that whole business out of place.
Yeah.
So all the revenue that we would have had just completely stopped. Had to turn all of those short-term rentals into long-term rentals. I still owned all of the contracts though. So I still had like the leases and any management contracts and all those different things. And I was able to take all of those contracts and sell them off to somebody else who then, put it towards their arbitrage business. So
Nice. So you got a little disposition in there. And
yeah,
yeah. So, it's funny you talk about cleaning, because people don't know how much money is in that margin if you can just build it out right. And what you just said is how you do it, right?
right. Yeah.
And how did you come upon that opportunity? Was that just something based on your analytical background that you were like saw and you built the opportunity for it, or did you stumble upon it?
I was paying like $150 per clean, and I knew what the hourly cost was to get the place cleaned was like $75, something like that. So I was like, okay, well, there's $75 in profit for every single turnover. I had about seven turnovers every single month across 15 properties, or at that point it was like 7 properties.
Yeah.
Right. So if you do the math there, it would be
It's a lot of
75
money.
times 7 times what is it? Another 7 again. Yeah. So 3,600 a month in profit. And I knew somebody who was really good at cleaning and overseeing everything. And I pretty much pitched it to her. I was like, hey, I'll give you all of the profit from these homes if you do all the work. And she's like, yeah, I'll do that. And she was, I was like, you do all of the work, I'll give you all the profit, right? And obviously, as it continued to scale, it would change, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But that gave her a base to work with. That was sort of the core thing there. It gave her the base salary, and I was relieved of a lot of the work that I had to do because of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. 1 year time back.
Yeah,
Love
exactly.
it. So you get to this point, then COVID hits, you dispo your portfolio. Is this where the Airbnb Data Guy was born?
pretty well.
Okay.
Yeah. This is so all right. So during this time period, what ended up happening was, going through a lull, right? Just lost my baby. I built it up. It kind of got destroyed by COVID. Didn't, had a little bit of money from the sale, so I was able to travel a little bit. And so I was able to travel around. So I literally just started traveling during COVID, which was like the worst time in the world to travel. And I didn't really know what I was going to do. I actually was focused on renewable energy at the time. I kind of got this like kick for renewable energy. Ended up working for a renewable energy startup for about 8 months. And during that entire time period, I had so many people reach out to me for data help out of everything, right? I would help out one person and I'd be like, yeah, this is how you understand the data. Because that was one thing I did really, really well in the Airbnb business, was I knew how to find really profitable properties. And I knew that I did it really well because every time I talked to everybody else who was doing this, they're like, how are you finding properties that make this much? They're like, nobody could understand my numbers. They were like, that doesn't make sense, right? I'm like, yeah, you just follow this process. And anyway, so I got so many like I helped somebody, then they would refer me, and then they refer me somebody else and somebody else, somebody else. And it just I think you even referred me a bunch of people. And like what ended up happening was it just turned into a business. Like I didn't set out going like, oh, I'm going to create an Airbnb data consulting company to help people find profitable properties across the United States. It was just like so many people needed help that there was a need. And I was like, how do I build this up? And, my entrepreneurial mind kind of kicked back in. and was like, what could this look like, right? But the one thing I want to state here, because this was one of the biggest game changers for me, without a doubt, and I recommend this to everybody now. I knew I had something here. I knew that I understood the data pretty well, better than most people, but I didn't consider myself to be an expert. I didn't have enough of a track record to be like extraordinarily confident that if I pointed anybody to any direction, that would feel good with the properties that they're going to be getting, right? And so what I did instead was I found a sort of like a job, but it was a contract that allowed me to hone in on my skills. And I think that was one of the biggest and best decisions I've ever made, to find a place where you can just work on your craft day in and day out until you feel unbelievably confident, right? Alex Hormozy says something along the lines of like, outwork your I can't remember what the quote is. I screwed it up, but essentially do so much back work that you feel unbelievably confident. Like you get rid of any of insecurities that you have about what you're doing. And so that process that I'm referring to right now is working with TechVestor, right? So TechVestor, being the largest short-term rental investment fund in America, my company had a contract with them. I acted as the head of data for TechVestor. And I took my process that I created for the rental arbitrage side of things and moved it over to the purchasing property side of things, and really wanted to prove that I knew for a fact how to that this process worked for finding profitable properties. And now, fast forward 2 years, and we're at over 140 plus properties that we purchased, deployed over 75 million, and every single last property is a cash flow positive property. And that's why I feel good to be like, yeah, you can call me the Airbnb data guy. I'll stand behind that now. right? Like it is a really good feeling, but it was also, once again, one of the best decisions, because it has allowed me to continue to move the company in the direction that I want it to go, to be able to help more people and to be able to ensure that nobody buys an unprofitable property. That's our entire mission. And now I feel like we have the backing and the strategy and the logic and everything to be able to do that. Does that make sense?
100%.
Yeah.
And I just want to give my testimony, right? Because a lot of people have looked at my journey and they looked at what I've done and they're like, how do you know what to buy? And I'm like, well, I got a cheat code. This guy. And so John has been an incredible resource, especially once we started jumping into the acquisition side of knowing what I should buy and what I shouldn't, right? And so I have a real solid, real like firm testimony of like you and your work and what you do and how good you are at it, right? But I also know that there's a lot of things that you do that I even haven't partaken of, and I want you to speak to that right now, right? So we've gone through all this. We know John Bianchi. We've origin story. We've heard all the things that you've learned, your background that's allowed you to get to this point. What is John doing today? What is TechVestor? What are you helping people in this industry? People that are watching this, how are they benefiting from you and what you do today?
So my company is called STR Search, right? Airbnb data consulting firm, right? Let's call it that, just so you have an understanding of what we do. And essentially, we help people find profitable properties. That's our number one thing that we've done. Now, for the past 2 years, we have had an exclusive contract with TechVestor to find them profitable properties. And again, we have a 100% success rate with working with them. Within the past 4 months, we have now opened that up to everybody. We no longer have that exclusivity contract, so anybody can now work with us. And so the core of our business is that we have people who are looking to purchase a property. They are either doing a joint venture deal, a 1031 exchange, or they're buying a property for the STR tax loophole, right, to save on taxes. And they realize that they're not an expert at finding a profitable property, or they do not have the time to figure out which property is going to be the best for them. And so then they contract us to be able to find them that property. And it's as simple as that, right? So that's the main thing we do. Now, with that being said, everything that we have built up to this point is to build trust. So I just want to kind of mention this a little bit. My entire business strategy and model is to give away the entire process so that if you can't afford to hire us, you can still do it yourself, right? We have released 6 free courses teaching every single step of my process. Lama, you literally just said that you learned from me. It's because one of my free courses, right? That free course that you learned from was about 2.5 hours long. As of 4 months ago, I came out with a course that's 40 hours long, which teaches every single last step of how I found all the properties for TechFester, going through all the data, 40 hours long. Don't skip out on anything. It's a masterclass, and it's 100% free, right? And I do this because there's a whole entire Airbnb community of people who are trying to build up their own businesses or build up a side hustle or get out of their job, W-2 job or whatever it is. And it frustrates me that almost all the data platforms out there don't provide a process for how to analyze the data. And so I created it myself. And so you can go through this process and you'll be able to find these profitable properties, right? It'll take a lot of time. It'll take a lot of practice. You got to get good at it, whatever, right? But the process is there. It's free and you can do it yourself. I do that because I want to build trust within the entire community so that so everyone knows who's in the Airbnb community, like John knows his stuff, right? Not only does he have the track record, but he also gave away all the content for free. And if you know anybody who wants help finding a property, you just come to us and we'll do it for them, right? Or for you, whoever it is. So that's STR Search. That's what we've done. And that's our entire business strategy of what we want to do.
I love it. I love it, man. For a few reasons, right? Abundance mentality, right? Because you're teaching people literally what you do, but what it also does, right? Because it's funny when I had launched my course, right, my mentorship program, I did a 5-day seminar. And in that 5 days, I literally taught everything that you would need and even more information than what I had when I started. But I think what people realize, because the benefit too of that abundance of like your 40-hour course, the 4-hour course, 2.5-hour course, it's a lot of work. It's like a lot of people are going to watch that and they're like, I don't have time for this, right?
Right.
And that is also why, services like yours they're so valuable, right? Because your most valuable asset is time. And people can then see, hey, this is all the work it takes. Why don't I just pay somebody who's been doing it for years, that understands it like the back of their hand, just do it for me. And so, dude, I love that. Your approach to it is an abundant mindset. And then you're providing a real solution that's how the business came about, is like you just solved the problem and everybody started coming, right?
Yeah. Which is also super interesting to think about because it wasn't a problem in 2020, right? It wasn't really like a problem. The idea of understanding Airbnb data and being able to like analyze these properties, that's always been a problem, right? Trying to understand Airbnb data. But the difficulty of finding a cash flowing property is only been within the past, 2 years, let's say, year and a half, 2 years, that people are really struggling to find a cash flowing property because most properties doubled in price and then the interest rates went sky high, right? And so now you have your expenses are way higher. And so then therefore your revenue has to be way higher. But for a property to comfortably hit those numbers, it's not super easy anymore, right? Because also travel is down because people are not traveling as much. So you have this entire combination of things happening, and all of a sudden people are like, I need help. And essentially we just go, we're here, right? Like we've done it. This is what we do. We can help. We have a perfect track record, right? So I find that interesting, just thinking about business in general. I love talking general business, right? Because if you look at the hotel industry, it's been around forever. My type of company exists in the hotel industry already and there's a bunch of companies like mine that'll help you figure out which place you should be putting a hotel, how it should be built. Like a hotel is only supposed to have, I think, 128 rooms in total. And that's the absolute perfect amount of rooms to have within a hotel to maximize profitability, which is why you see all of the hotels nowadays have 4 floors, and that's pretty well it, right? I find that super interesting because that's somebody like me in the hotel industry figuring that stuff out, right? And so I think that the Airbnb industry is just maturing and it's becoming more difficult. And when it becomes more difficult, more of these specialized services tend to come out. And luckily, I've just been absolutely obsessed with Airbnb data for whatever reason for the past 6 years. And I get to be a part of this sort of changing part in the Airbnb industry. So
I love it, man. It's funny because I feel like a lot of what you're talking about is a topic that's sensitive, right? How many times do you go on Facebook forums, all these Airbnb communities, and the word saturation gets thrown around, right? Mm-hmm. People are like, it's saturated. And although there's some truth to that, I think a more accurate term for the Airbnb industry is that it's matured.
That nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. As you were saying it, I was picturing it in my head because what's happening with the saturation is the bottom people are dying, right?
Yep.
But the top people are thriving. And
Yep.
so what's happening, if you were to think about it, I always like to use like a grocery store aisle as an example, because people don't look at Airbnbs as if they're side by side, right? So if you were to be walking down the chip aisle, right, and you see a bag of Doritos, which is the family size, and it's directly beside the no-name brand that's the regular size, it's obviously going to cost more money, right? It's a
Yep.
better brand, it's more trusted, and it's a bigger bag. And so for all those reasons, it's going to cost more money. And that's kind of how, if you were to look at two Airbnbs side by side, why is one making more than the other? Well, it adds more value. It's giving you more things, right? And what I would say is Airbnb used to be as if we were to walk down that chip aisle and every single chip bag was a no-name brand chip bag that was not very good,
Yeah.
right? And then all of a sudden, Doritos starts taking up part of that aisle, and people are like,
Yep.
"Oh, I'm going to take Doritos," right? And then all of a sudden, like Ruffles gets in there, and you're like, "Well, I'm going to take Ruffles." And what's happening is these no-name brand chips are kind of getting pushed out, and so that's kind of what's happening to the Airbnb inventory and why everyone's screaming saturation. It's more so if you're losing, it tends to be, not always, tends to be that you're a no-name brand chip bag. That's what your Airbnb is like in comparison to the Doritos full size, right? So
100%.
yeah, it's just the inventory is getting better, right?
Yep.
It's a Motel 8 that was kind of crappy on the side of the middle of nowhere used to work. Now it doesn't. You got to be
Yep.
those like brand new Holiday Inns, right?
Yep. Well, and speaking to that too, right? Because then people hear that and they're like, well, I don't have all this money to go buy 50 doors. You don't have to. Like,
Right.
in fact, like the people that have more time to focus on one or two really, really good doors and differentiate yourself, you can make substantial income from a single door, right? If you just know how to play the game enough to replace a W-2, right?
Can I break for a sec real quick?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
One of our best properties does a good amount over 100,000.
Yep.
Right. So like that's one
Single
property.
door.
That's
Yep.
one property, right? One. You know how easy it is to manage one Airbnb? And
Yep.
imagine if that one Airbnb was bringing in that amount. Like it's mind-boggling to think that that's even possible, but it is, right? So yeah, I fully agree with that. But again, that was mainly because of the data. So if you don't have a lot of time, if you don't have a lot of money, right? If you don't have a lot of money to be able to like throw into all these different properties, then get really good at the data. Get extraordinarily good at the data and find yourself a killer, and then open up that one and make sure you're doing it right. That's
Absolutely.
what we do.
Absolutely. You know, and a statistic that a lot of people don't know is that the top 1% of operators on Airbnb specifically are responsible for the top 25% of the income on the platform.
Wow.
So like I pulled that data earlier last year. And so it might have changed, but still, that's like, within the last 18 months, that rings true, which tells you that if you're playing the game well, people are choosing your property over and over and over and over again. Right.
Yes. Yeah. I'd be so I'm going to just play a little devil's advocate on this one, because I'd be very curious to see that data, because you get these like uber luxury properties that don't make money.
Yeah.
They may make $400,000 a year, but their expenses are so high because the property costs like $10 million that they actually don't make any money. Right.
That's a really good point. Yeah. In terms of like, what is their net rev, right? As opposed to growth. Yeah. And that I don't know. So that's a good point. It's a really good point.
But I mean, that could be the red. The first thing that popped in my head was the first thought is, well, those might be like uber luxury properties. And I actually hate the fact that people think you need to have an uber luxury property to be extremely profitable. You do not. You need to create an immersive experience that is amazing for people, that is in a property that gives them what they need, and they will pay you what you want. So as an example, we have there's these two properties we always compare to in Scottsdale. One costs $2 million. It makes $250,000 a year. The other one is a property that I help find that's less than $1 million, makes $250,000 a year. Same revenue, over $1 million difference between the two in purchase price, right? So imagine how profitable that one is, right? That costs $1 million less to purchase. So $1 million less in mortgage payments that you got to be putting out and whatnot. So what I'm trying to say is you don't need luxury properties to be a great property. Just want to point that out.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Okay, well, we got some questions. Chris just posted his question. Chris, what's up, brother? Welcome. I have a few properties under my belt as an owner and as a property manager here in Park City, Utah. Utah, let's go, baby. With the market, with the market being so competitive, I feel that anything on the MLS that could be a potential good deal would be sold same day. So it feels like it's not even worth looking on the MLS. What are your alternative ways to find deals besides the MLS? Or do you feel like you can still find good deals on the MLS? I have an opinion about this, but John, I'm gonna let you go first.
Okay. I was gonna say right now, I guarantee your opinion is gonna be way different than my opinion because I don't buy in Park City, Utah for a very specific reason that I don't know what to like. I've looked into it. I've looked into it for you, right? Specifically
Yeah.
for you. And that's probably the only time I've ever looked into Park City because it's just insanely expensive, right? That's perfect transition after talking about super luxury properties, right? Now, mind you, I know there's stuff that can work because I've looked into things for you specifically. One thing that comes to my mind with that question is, you're saying that stuff on the MLS is going to go within one day. Well, it's going to somebody, right? So if you're prepared, you're ready, you could be that person that it goes to. Simple as that. I only buy all of the deals that we have purchased are on the MLS. There's been maybe a handful that have not been on the MLS. So we're talking like at this point, we're almost over 160 across all of our clients. And maybe like less than 10 have been off the MLS. So
Yep.
there are a ton of great deals. However, are those deals in Park City? I'll leave that to Lame.
Yeah, so I love it. All right. And this is where I'm going to give you my opinion. The first one is I 100%, 1,000% agree with John. Good deals in any market, they're not found. You don't just find them on the MLS, they're created, right? And at the end of the day, if you can understand how to create the deal, how to stand out, that's what's going to matter. With that being said, Utah as a whole is a very expensive market comparative to many other markets, especially the ones that John buys in. Hence, another huge factor in this is how you acquire. It's less about where was the property, where did I find it, this, that, and it's more about how did I transact it? And, enter in CASTR, creative finance, right? That's my game, right? And so I think when you can do that, that changes significantly all of the data, really. Like when I can buy a property that is uber expensive, but it has a 3% interest rate, suddenly everything's changed, right? And so that would be my opinion, Chris. And that's what we've done, obviously, right? The last 2-3 years, I haven't bought a single property. That's a lie. I bought maybe one or two traditionally just because I have income and they've been multi. But outside of that, it's been 99.9% we've purchased creative. And these opportunities are around us. So to John's point, understand the data, know your market, but then also understand how to create the deal where others may not see where it's being created, right?
We are the exact opposite of each other. I buy all on the MLS and you buy all off the MLS.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing though, is I do buy on MLS. Like I'll buy honestly a large majority, like 70% of our deals are on MLS.
But you figure out how to you negotiate with the owner to make it
correct. That's the key right there. Is really, and that's where the sales side, communication side comes into play. Yeah. Right? Is like how can I identify motivation on the MLS, and then on top of that, understanding key points and having the right conversations to propose a creative deal that makes sense, right?
See, this is where I just don't have those sales skills, and I can't transition those. So I think we need to figure out a way that we can combine these efforts. Where I'll point you into these great markets. You can turn
100%,
right?
Well, and John, we're gonna have you on our CASTR community. I know people are gonna love having you there. I haven't talked to you about it yet, but I will. So
awesome. Cool,
but we got dude, this has been awesome. We're getting great feedback. Chris, love it, appreciate it. Spence, thanks, John and Lame, great stuff. This has been fun, mostly because we vibe and you've been one of the OGs. And so I
got you.
Dude, I just appreciate you. If any of you have any final questions for John, post them here. But John, I want to ask you one last question, which is a question I ask everybody. What is your number one piece of advice for people stepping into this space today?
Study the data. It's a simple. If you're stepping into the space today, I've already said this on the podcast, but I'll say it again. If you're stepping into the space today and you don't have any properties, all you have to make sure you do is you find a property that will cash flow then you can figure everything else out afterwards. Stop worrying about how you're going to message a guest or how you're going to clean the property. You can figure those things out as soon as you find the property. They're not that difficult to figure out. But if you screw up and you get the wrong property, either under rent or you purchase it, it's a really hard thing to turn back on. And it usually takes about 1 to 2 years to figure out that you screwed up, because you've got to go the entire time period and be like, I didn't cash flow. Maybe next year is going to be better. And you try again. And I'm just going to tell a quick story because this literally happened right now, where I talked to a lady 2 years ago and she's like, I'm going to be buying in Kissimmee right around Disney World. And I told her, I'm like, that's not a great market. I'm like, it's a really difficult market to make it work. Like, you got to do everything right. It scares the hell out of me. Right. She buys 2 properties there. And then 2 years later, she's, we're on a phone call and she's like, I'm going to be 1031 exchanging these properties and getting rid of them. And I want you to help me find better properties. And we've already contracted with her and started with her, and she's already got a property under contract. So yeah, just I'm not, she's an amazing lady, great lady, not trying to put her down anyway, but it's just it's a real story. And so all I'm trying to say, guys, is study the data back and forth. Make sure you understand it. I've given away over 40 hours of free training. Go to strsearch.com, sign up for the free course, start ripping through it, and figure out how to find a profitable property. Lame, I appreciate you having me on here, man.
Dude, love it, John. Hey, he's down below, the Airbnb Data Guy. Make sure you follow John, and then make sure you also follow up on his services. They're the best in the industry. I put the URL down right here. We'll also make sure you got a link so you guys have access to it. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. Appreciate you, John, for showing up as well. Until next time, guys, we'll see you. Take it easy. We out.
See ya.
Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed that one. I personally think this is one of the most value-packed ones we've had in a long time, especially for those that are wanting to start to get into the game and wanting to really perform at a high level and understand the market at a high level. And so make sure that you follow John and his story. Make sure you also reach out to us. We actually are having John for our CASTR community as a guest. And so if you want personal time with these people, go ahead and hop on a call with my team and let's get you on the CASTR community. We have students that are joining weekly. We have students that are killing it. I feel like we have a few that are graduating now because they're now on their way to buying multiple properties and are no longer needing as much help with their first. And so if you are still wanting to learn how to grow your portfolio, 10x it, or get your first deal, let's hop on a call with our CASTR community. Click the link below. Excited to see you all there. Thank you again for the support. Appreciate it. We out, baby.